think when we last talked, the Russians and the Ukrainians were engaged in a death match in the vicinity of BAHMUT. They've been Solodar when we last spoke, with the same area, same battle. It's advanced. The Russians are advancing. They're threatening the Ukrainians with encirclement. The Ukrainians are pouring reinforcements into the area, and this is turning out to be potentially one of the most decisive battles of the war. I've been saying for some time now that it's my assessment that the Ukrainians cannot win. I've cited military math to make that argument, that they run out of resources, they run out of manpower. And what's happening, I think, is that the analysis from other areas are starting to back this up. We had the Secretary General of NATO come out, Jens Stoltenberg, and acknowledge that Ukraine will run out of artillery ammunition sometime in the summer. And when you're in an artillery-driven war and you run out of artillery ammunition, it means the war is over. China has come out, and their elite military academy has run the same numbers, and they've come to the same conclusion that Ukraine loses this conflict sometime this summer. And it appears that the mainstream media is starting to wake up to this reality. You see the Washington Post, for instance, running a major story about how bloody this battle is for Ukraine. So I think what we're looking at is the final stages of what will probably be the major battle of this war. If you're a historian and you've studied World War II, this might be the equivalent of the Battle of Kursk in the summer of 1943, where the Germans basically expended the totality of their strategic reserves. And when they lost that battle, they were never able again to constitute sufficient military power to threaten the defeat of the Soviets. A Soviet victory from that point on became inevitable. There's a lot of fighting left, a lot of casualties, and if Bakhmut falls, there will be a lot of fighting left and a lot of casualties. But the bottom line is there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Another major development is that China is stepping up to the plate on the heels of a major diplomatic victory that was scored by Chinese diplomats in bringing Saudi Arabia and Iran together, normalizing relations between these two longtime regional enemies. China now appears to be attempting to do a similar brokering of peace between Russia and Ukraine. We have the Chinese leader, President Xi Jinping, getting ready to fly to Moscow, where he will have discussions with Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, and then he will hold a video conference with President Zelensky. And I think when you assess the fact that China's putting its national prestige on the line, the prestige of its leader, they wouldn't commit to something like this unless they felt there was a pretty good chance of success, at least putting something on the table that was viable. And I think the Ukrainian leader, when confronted with the fact that just about everybody says he's losing this war and he can't win this war and there's nothing that can happen, who knows, there might be a chance for peace here. There might be a chance for an early peace. I mean, if Ukraine turns this potential Chinese diplomatic gambit down, then they're just basically setting themselves up for an execution, because then Russia will just go forward with this war, and this war will be over, as I said, sometime in the summer. Hopefully, China will be able to convince Ukraine and its allies that that's the best option they can hope for. There's no other option. Choose peace and live, or choose war and die.
Okay, when you say Ukraine and its allies, besides the United States, who are its allies?
Europe and NATO are its allies.
Okay.
I know that NATO is, Jens Stoltenberg has called this an existential struggle for NATO, that if Russia wins, NATO loses. And there are non-NATO European entities such as Sweden and Finland who are providing military assistance. So we're within the European Union has stepped up and talked about a common European Union policy which goes beyond simply NATO. And then the group of seven economic powers, which of course includes non-European, non-NATO members, but the core members of which are NATO countries, have likewise sided with Ukraine on this conflict. So it's, we speak of the United States, we speak of NATO, we speak of the European Union, we speak of the G7, when we speak of the collective West that is confronting Russia in Ukraine, using Ukraine as a proxy.
In some of our previous conversations, you mentioned we were 1 second away from doomsday. Is that still a reality?
Yesterday, a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone aircraft was downed off the coast of Crimea after violating Russian no-fly zones and carrying out intelligence collection operations that the Russians deemed to be sensitive. The fact that that aircraft is down now, the United States has to consider how to respond. Do they send another drone up, this time with a combat fighter escort? Do they stop sending drones up there by emboldening Russia to maybe carry out more aggressive actions against U.S. resources? The bottom line is there's a real possibility that the United States and Russia could end up shooting at each other. And once that happens, there's a real possibility that this could escalate to a nuclear conflict. There's no such thing as nuclear war. So we come back to what I said all along. We're less than a second away from midnight. One stupid mistake, one error of judgment, and we could find ourselves in a nuclear conflict, and none of us will survive.
In my time in the hospital, I was flipping the stations quite a bit, and MSNBC, of course, was talking pro-Ukrainian, and they were saying, we're helping them for democracy in the Ukraine, and then they talked about January 6th and how that was a big lie. But what they're perpetrating on MSNBC is a bigger lie. It's bigger than January 6th. This could annihilate the whole world. I can't imagine so many people in a position to lie like this. What do you think?
Well, it's the easiest lie in the world to tell because you're lying about Russia, and most Americans don't know anything about Russia. We're ignorant of Russia, therefore we are susceptible to, being influenced by misinformation. And MSNBC is one of the largest dispensers of misinformation. They're horrible. Maddow is right up there with the worst propagandists in history in terms of spewing lies about Russia. While you were in the hospital, I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and meet with the Russian ambassador. And I had several conversations with him about arms control, about potential of bettering U.S.-Russian relations. And one of the things that we both agreed upon was the role played by Russophobia in creating this dangerous environment where Americans view Russia as an enemy, where the Americans view Russia as a threat. And this is absolutely the case. I mean, if Americans would just stop listening to what people who have an agenda that's built around the notion of militarily confronting Russia, stop listening to them and start formulating your own opinions. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I mean, if at the end of the day you've assessed all you can assess about Russia and you feel that Russia is evil and a threat, then that's your opinion, and I respect your opinion. I disagree with it, but at least I can say that's not Rachel Maddow's opinion. You came up with that. But most Americans can't say I have deep, strongly held convictions about Russia because you don't know anything about Russia. Not a darn thing. You can start by, going on TV and watching Russian movies from the Second World War. We like to watch American movies, and we're getting imbued with patriotism. But by comparison, the Russian movies are deep. They're soul-searching. They're intellectual, And you learn a lot about the Russians by watching them, because they're not flag-waving, chest-thumping, warmongering movies. These are movies about human beings. And I'd say start watching that, and if you watch it on YouTube, you can get it with closed caption. So you can watch and understand. Start appreciating Russian art. Right now there's a trend to ban Russian literature in institutions. So people can't do what I did in college: study Dostoevsky, study Tolstoy, study Lermontov, study Pushkin. I'm not claiming to be, anybody who knows me knows that I'm not anybody who claims to be this most erudite intellect in the world, but at least I tried. At least I gave it a shot. And I'm glad I did, because it opened my eyes. It's complex stuff. And again, you get tremendous insight into, the Russian psyche, the Russian mind. And once you learn about the Russian people, you're not going to fear them, because you realize they're just as human as you are. They have the same desires as you do. And therefore, all the idiots that are out there talking about the need to go to war against Russia are just that, idiots. If you want to save America, do what's best for America. If you want to preserve the world so that your children and grandchildren can live free of the fear of nuclear conflict, then you got to overcome Russophobia. This is, to me, one of the biggest threats out there, is this wall of ignorance that's generated by this irresponsible Russophobia that matches or exceeds the nonsense of the McCarthy era. I mean, it's funny how when you speak of history, you can say McCarthy to most Americans, they'll say, yeah, that was the Red Scare, Joseph McCarthy. Yeah, he was wrong. Yeah. How come you can accept that Joseph McCarthy was wrong back in the 50s? Today, you buy into anything that Rachel Maddow says. He's worse than Joseph McCarthy. 10 times.